Welcome back to video number 2. I want to take a few moments and point out to you the importance of your approach to behavior analysis. Like I said, you're going to learn to use different premises or some of the reasoning. And the key for this particular poster is based on the lawfulness of behavior. In behavior analysis, we look at behavior as a function of the environment, and that's FK01 is the first foundational concept. And I want to just quickly share some ideas and examples to help you frame this in terms of looking at behavior as it functions in the environment. You'll see a graph with 2 lines on it, 2 graphs actually, and the idea here is that ongoing behavior has some kind of reinforcing property from the environment, and that behavior will either continue to occur, to continue to be reinforced, or something might change. That's what the intervention line shows, and then the green line shows that there's more behavior. So ongoing behavior is maintained by reinforcement, and increasing behavior is being increased, more of that behavior, by some kind of reinforcement. It's one of the key concepts in the field. The second graph, which shows the red line going down, takes the same premise that we have ongoing behavior, so there's something reinforcing that behavior. Then we have the line for the intervention. At this point, something has changed, and we can see behavior would either go up in the top graph, it would stay the same, or in the case of going down, we no longer use the concept of reinforcement because reinforcement only explains ongoing, maintaining, increasing behavior. So in the second graph, we see we have behavior occurring, something changed, and now there's less behavior. And basically, that's all behavior can do. It can either occur or not occur. It can occur continually, or it can occur more frequently, more often, longer, or occur less frequently, less often. If in the case of the second graph, what we see is it could decrease for one of 2 main reasons. One is it's no longer being reinforced. If reinforcement makes behavior go up, then the absence of reinforcement would make behavior go down. A second reason would be some form of punishment occurred in the environment. Something occurred to the behavior, after the behavior, and that had a punishing or suppressing effect, had a deceleration effect on the behavior. The third graph down shows 4 common schedules that are referred to as intermittent schedules. And all the concepts I'm mentioning here are just to get you introduced to realize you really got to read about them, learn them, understand them, recognize them around you, learn the definitions, learn 2 or 3 definitions. I require my students to learn the definition in the text and the glossary, and in another glossary, learn at least 2 to 3 definitions so you really know the concept, not just one explanation of it. And what you'll see, there are 4 graphs, 4 lines of data. 2 of those are based on responses, variable ratio of responses or fixed ratio of responses. 2 of those are based on time passing, a variable interval of time or fixed interval of time. And lawfulness of behavior has shown us that if you deliver reinforcers based on a particular schedule, you'll get a very particular predictable pattern. You'll see that the fixed schedules produce pauses in the responding, and you'll see that the ratio schedules produce higher rates of responding. So it's important that you learn these schedules and realize when you're observing the world around you, you'll be able to start to see these schedules in action as well as countless other schedules. Below that, we have the same basic information, but we have a line as an intervention, and what's happened in that second part to show lawful relations is when behavior that was reinforced is no longer reinforced, you will see for some period of time the pattern continues but gradually slows down and flattens out. Those graphs particularly are called cumulative records, where the data doesn't actually go down. It only goes up when the behavior is occurring. When it goes flat, then there's no behavior occurring. You'll learn about those more in your courses. Now, foundational to behavior, of course, is FK10, where you need to learn the difference between behavior, response, and response class. Very briefly, behavior has 3 dimensions. It has occurrence and repeatability. That's one way to measure the frequency, the occurrence of behavior, an event of behavior. Response refers to a single instance of behavior, and a response class refers to a number of responses that group together as a class and accomplish a particular behavior. One quick example might be a repertoire of getting dressed. The behavior is getting dressed behavior. The response is made up of putting on wearable clothing items. And the response class is all of the responses it takes to put on your clothes, and then you can go outside and play. So of course, key to behavior being a function of the environment is first looking at behavior and how responses make up behavior, and how those response classes group together to serve a particular function. Understanding the grouping of response classes is going to be very important in understanding function of behavior. The second one in that second column is going to be about the environment, and the distinction between an environment, stimulus, and stimulus class. Again, since behavior is a function of the environment, this FK11 second concept is crucial to realize we have basically 2 environments. We have the environment that's public, what we can see and observe, and we have an environment that's basically private, call it private behavior, within the skin that we don't necessarily see or hear. And the environment is loaded with a number of stimuli, and a particular stimulus is defined as some kind of energy change in the environment that's detectable to our senses. That points back to empiricism, to empirical measures. And the stimulus class are those stimuli that together represent a type of effect on behavior, whether it's a number of types of reinforcers or whether it's a number of types of stimuli that set the occasion to respond certain ways. When you're driving through traffic, there are different signs on the road, there are different signals hanging from intersections. Those make up the stimulus class of stimuli in the environment to which we respond with our behavior. So you want to be sure to really drill down deep and understand response classes and stimulus classes, and you'll get a lot of reading on that and a lot of chances to go over those. The next one is about stimulus equivalence. This is a powerful concept. Stimulus equivalence applies to the two main groups of behavior, what we call reflexes and operants. And stimulus equivalence shows us that if we teach a child, give a child a picture of a dog, for example, and then we give a child some other pictures of other animals and say, find the one that looks like this, the child can learn that this looks like a dog, this looks like a dog, and he really is just matching those pictures. So that would be like a dog is a dog, A is A. We can also write the letter D-O-G and teach the child that these letters are the same thing as that picture. And so the child can be taught what we call symmetry, that this picture and these three letters, D-O-G, represent the same thing. Those stimuli are equivalent. The word dog is the same concept as the actual picture of a dog, the same concept. So stimuli have equivalence. We can also take the spelled word D-O-G and teach the child that when you see those letters, the sound it makes is dog. So you see on the bottom we have A equals A. A picture of a dog is a picture of a dog. That's reflexivity. A picture of a dog and the spelled letters D-O-G are similar. They have stimulus equivalence. And I can also teach that the spelled word dog and the sound dog is similar. And what we get from that, what's so wonderful about stimulus equivalence is the child can then, the learner can then figure out if A is B and B is C, then I get transitivity. And I realize that when I hear the word dog, it's the same as the picture or the spelled letters. And this just multiplies beyond imagination to all of the stimuli that basically serve an equivalent function as a stimulus class, which then affects responses in a response class. Now the third column is very crucial because this is the heart and soul of behavior analysis. We're talking about FK13, which we refer to as reflexive relations. Now these are what most people call feelings and emotions. And our terminology is an unconditioned stimulus, a US, elicits, causes, provokes an unconditioned response. It's unconditioned. This is a natural reflex. These two concepts constitute a reflex. We know from our research in lawfulness of behavior that respondent behaviors, for example, cold air will give you goosebumps, hot air will make you sweat, a loud noise will startle you, and that startle, that auditory stimulus, will often set off respondent behaviors such as an increased heart rate, perhaps a tightening of the chest muscles, maybe a dryness of your throat, and perhaps even a flushing of your face. Those are behaviors that are elicited and they're involuntary. The way respondent conditioning works, and you should remember this from your Psych 101, that in an environment where you have basically neutral stimuli that get paired with unconditioned stimuli that set off unconditioned responses, then that neutral stimulus turns into a conditioned stimulus because now it's been paired and now it's been learned. Basically our body has learned under those stimulus conditions to exhibit the same response, which is a reflex that is similar to the original reflex. And so respondent conditioning explains how a wide variety of stimuli come to elicit all kinds of emotional behaviors. Skinner referred to reflexive relations as emotional behaviors. We learn about these in psychology as psychological labels for emotional states. When someone says they are frightened or scared or anxious, we translate that into a respondent model knowing that some stimulus set off some kind of reflex in the body, some kind of sensory systems fired off, and we have a feeling, and that feeling then is taught to us as an emotion: happiness, joy, scared, frightened, anxiety. Anxiety is a very common concept and well understood. Having a behavior analysis, we don't look at anxiety as a cause of behavior or even a result of behavior. We realize that some stimulus environment has set off the reflex physiologically, and the person feels these physiological feelings, and they might report that as being anxious or nervous or scared, any one of several psychological labels. So criticism of the field has been The behavior analysts don't believe in feelings. They don't believe in thinking. But as I mentioned earlier, thinking is a behavior. And feeling anxious is the behavior. It's just that it's not that the feeling causes the behavior, because as we look at the science of it, those feelings are behaviors. And what we talk about is the labels of how we feel. So behavior analysis very much looks and understands feelings. When someone says a child is anxious, we know what the stimuli are contributing to that. We can track down and identify the stimuli that are contributing to that feeling, and then try to use what we know about treatment models of progressive relaxation or systematic desensitization to help improve that situation, teach someone not to be so anxious, teach them how to calm themselves down. Now that leads to operant conditioning, where we do things when we feel certain feelings. We have learned to respond, and these responses are not elicited reflexes. They're not involuntary, but they're rather learned behaviors. So if you are feeling hot and you're sweating, you might turn on a fan. You might open a window. Now that's not a reflex. The fact that I was feeling a certain way, a certain form of stimulation, heat, I then have learned to do things about it. The same condition, if it's too cold, I might learn to put on a sweater or turn on the furnace. So operant conditioning shows us that with the stimulus, the first S of the SRS, sometimes referred to, in fact today commonly referred to as the ABCs, there was a stimulus situation, an antecedent condition, there was a response to that stimulus condition, not a reflex, but a learned response. I've learned that when I'm hot, I can go to the refrigerator and get something to drink. I don't go to the washing machine even though there's water there. It's not going to be as cold. So with the operant conditioning, we've learned that under certain stimulus conditions, we give certain responses, and those responses change the environment. So now the stimulus condition has changed, and then that behavior might be reinforced. If it's reinforced, I'll get more of that behavior. If it's not reinforced, I'll get less of that behavior. So because we understand reflexive relations, reflexes, and respondent conditioning, and we understand operant conditioning, we can explain a lot of the lawful relations about behavior and the environment back to behavior as a function of the environment. And as we understand the science behind stimuli and responses in our bodies, and we use the language of science, we can make a tremendous amount of difference in how we approach behavior. Now, the tricky part is to add those up, and that's FK16, where the respondent-operant interaction, which is, you could think of like a continuum. So it's not that these feelings are causing behaviors, but if I am feeling hot, I'm going to do something operant about it. So about every situation, you wake up tired, hungry, bored, slipping, whatever you wake up, those feelings are going to affect what you do, how quickly you get up. If you're late, you're going to jump out of bed and try to get dressed and race to work or whatever you have to be. So we look at behavior analysis as how the body is feeling and responding to things like being hungry or tired or cold or hot, and what we do about it operantly, how we've learned to behave when we have those feelings. Behavior is a combination of our respondent, our feelings, and our operant behaviors, what we've learned to do based on how we feel. The last column is another graph showing behavior ongoing, and shows that sometimes behavior will go up or maintain. So we know some kind of reinforcement. Any ongoing behavior is some kind of reinforcement occurring in the environment. Some properties are out there. The bottom shows basically behavior ongoing, and then it's decreasing. So we know it's not being reinforced. It's either being ignored, it's not being reinforced, or perhaps it's being punished in some way, shape, or form. Below that is a little grid. It's hard to see the lines, but I made a little box with the SRS and function. The top half I put into the respondent model to show an unconditioned stimulus elicits a negative response. The stimulus, the consequence of that doesn't change it because it's a reflex. And so I put that, it just functions as an unconditioned situation. A neutral stimulus gets paired with the unconditioned stimulus and becomes a conditioned stimulus, which elicits and sets off a similar response to the unconditioned response, sometimes the same one, but that of course functions as a condition of learning. The bottom half of that is listed with MOs, which are called motivating operations, SDs, which are discriminating stimuli, S deltas, which is a different form of discriminating stimuli, and SPs, which is a third form of discriminating stimuli. The SD signals that if I respond a certain way in this situation, I'm likely to be reinforced. That shows that there's behavior and make up responses and response classes. The third column shows that something is added or removed, some kind of stimulus, and that can either produce SR plus, positive reinforcement, or negative reinforcement, SR minus, because the behavior is occurring. I did what it took to get what I wanted or to get out of what I didn't. I can also show that an S delta, and you're going to learn about these as you read, and it's critical to really learn these differences and read them, understand them, find them, recognize the environment. And S delta is a stimulus condition where I've learned a response is not going to make any change that I want, so I'm not likely to respond in the presence of an S delta because it hasn't been reinforced in the past. And the SP is the situation that suggests that punishment may be forthcoming for certain behaviors under certain environments, where stimulus is added or removed, and that you could represent as an SP plus for a positive punishment, or a signal for punishment, negative punishment. This is just my own little way of trying to build the ABC chart in a way that makes sense to me. Under that you see a matching law, a simple graph. It's not critical to memorize the formula at this time. But in a nutshell, matching law has taught us that you're going to exhibit the amount of behavior it takes to get the reinforcement that's worth it to you. So we're all going to give different amounts of behavior based on how important the reinforcement is to us. If I'm really, really hungry, I'll probably give more behavior than if I'm not really hungry. Finally, in the bottom right is an example of a treatment curve, treatment graph. And we have a baseline on the left where behavior is either occurring a lot or little. Then you'll see in the shaded area, in this case, we have behavior going on, and then treatment starts. You see a little loop up the top after that dotted line, and that's what is sometimes called an extinction burst, where behavior that was reinforced is not being reinforced. The reinforcement relationship has been broken, and there'll be a little extra behavior trying to get back to that. When it doesn't pay off, you see it drop suddenly, drops pretty dramatically, and then comes back up a little bit. And this particular graph is referred to as a rebound effect. Behavior that was being reinforced before and stopped being reinforced will often come back. Other terms you'll learn that refer to that same phenomena is going to be something like spontaneous recovery. And some people talk about that term in terms of what is referred to as resurgence. So again, a lot of you basically know all of these things. You just don't use this language for them. Your challenge as a behavior analyst is to learn to describe the world around you in behavior analytic terms and then turn around and translate it into everyday language. I'll be right back. Go ahead and get a drink.